I've lived in this neighborhood for 12 years, long enough to know the rhythm of every house, every lawnmower, every gossiping porch light. It's a good place, clean, quiet, family-friendly. At least it used to be. Before Karen became president of the HOA. You know the type, always wearing sunglasses even indoors, walks her tiny dog like she's leading a parade, clipboard in one hand, judgment in the other. Her kingdom wasn't a castle, it was the cul-de-sac, and she ruled it with an iron manicure. But honestly, I didn't care. My world didn't revolve around HOA drama. I had Emily, my little girl. She's 13, has a laugh that makes people smile even on bad days. She's been in a wheelchair since birth, but she never lets that stop her. She paints, races down the driveway, and talks about opening an art shop one day. Her wheelchair isn't just a tool, it's her freedom. And she loved our street, everyone knew her. Mr. Dawson across the road always waved, kids stopped to pet her golden retriever, Daisy. For years, it felt like home. Until the day Karen's son came back. Brady, 19, built like a linebacker, temper like a firecracker. He moved back in after taking a break from college, which was Karen's polite way of saying kicked out. The first time I met him, I was loading groceries when I heard a truck engine roar behind me. Big, black, lifted forward with a flag the size of a bedsheet whipping in the wind. He stopped inches from Emily's ramp. I walked up and said, "Hey buddy, can you pull forward a bit? My daughter needs to roll down." He looked right at me, smirked, and said, "Tell her to honk first next time." I stood there stunned. Before I could say a word, Karen came jogging out of her house, perfect hair, perfect smile. "Oh, Brady, don't tease the neighbors," she said, pretending to laugh it off. He chuckled, revved the truck, and sped away, mud flying onto my driveway. Karen leaned closer to me. "You know how boys are," she said, full of energy. Then she winked and walked off. That was the start. For the next few days, Brady parked wherever he wanted, sometimes right in front of Emily's ramp. When I asked him politely to move, he'd roll down his window and blast his stereo like I didn't exist. Then came the comments. "Hey, cool scooter," he yelled once as Emily wheeled by. "Bet it doesn't do 0 to 60. She tried to laugh it off, but I saw the hurt in her eyes. That night I walked over to Karen's house. I kept my cool. "Karen, I think your son's being a bit rough on Emily," I said. "She's just a kid." She smiled that fake, tight-lipped smile. "He's teasing, boys do that, maybe she shouldn't be out where cars drive." My jaw tightened. "It's a cul-de-sac, everyone uses it." "Well, maybe she shouldn't," she said, and she closed the door. A week later, everything changed. It was a Saturday morning. Sun shining, birds chirping, one of those perfect days that feels safe. Emily was painting on the porch while I trimmed the hedge. She rolled down the ramp to get more paint from the garage. That's when I heard the sound, a heavy engine, then a crunch, followed by silence. I turned the corner and froze. Pieces of metal lay scattered across the sidewalk. Bent aluminum, cracked plastic, twisted wires. For a moment, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then I saw it, the pink sticker Emily had put on her chair, the one that said "Rollin' Princess." Her wheelchair was in pieces. I dropped the hedge trimmer and ran. "Emily," I shouted. She was standing at the porch, eyes wide, hands over her mouth. Tears were already streaming down her cheeks. Across the street, Brady's truck idled. He was laughing with another kid in the passenger seat. When he saw me running, he sped off, tires screeching. Karen came out seconds later, pretending to look concerned. "Oh no," she said, voice dripping with fake sympathy. "You really should keep her toys off the road." That word "toys" set something off inside me. I took a step toward her, but she raised her hand. "If you start yelling, I'll have to report you for harassment. HOA policy, you know." Then she smiled. "I'll bring it up at the next meeting." And just like that, she turned and walked away. That night, I sat in the garage staring at the broken chair. Emily was asleep upstairs, clutching her stuffed bear. I kept hearing her cry, replaying that sound in my head until I thought I'd lose it. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was Jake, my son, corporal in the U.S. Marines, stationed out of state. He said, "Dad, you sound off, what's wrong?" I didn't even know where to start. I told him everything, every word, every smirk, every piece of that broken chair. There was silence on the other end for a long time. Then finally he said, calm and steady, "Don't do anything yet, I'll handle it when I get home." That's when I realized this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Because when a Marine says he'll handle it, you know something about to change. When I hung up the phone that night, I sat there in the dark garage, the silence thick enough to choke on. Jake's words kept echoing in my head. "Don't do anything yet, I'll handle it when I get home." But waiting wasn't easy. The next morning, I found a yellow HOA notice taped to my front door. Violation: improper storage of damaged equipment, fine $150. They were talking about Emily's broken wheelchair. I actually laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was insane. The audacity of these people, the same ones who watched a disabled girl's chair get run over, now calling it clutter. I stormed straight to Karen's house. She opened the door, holding a mug that said "Boss Lady." "Can I help you?" she said sweetly. "You left this on my door," I said, holding the notice up. She nodded like a teacher grading homework. "Yes, the HOA has to enforce community standards. Leaving broken items outside is considered unsightly." "It's my daughter's wheelchair," I said. "Your son ran it over." She tilted her head. "Do you have proof of that?" My fists clenched. I saw the tire tracks. Karen smiled, small and sharp, circumstantial. Then she leaned closer and said, "I'd be careful with accusations like that. Defamation's a serious thing." I could feel my pulse in my neck. "Lady, you have no idea who you're messing with." "Oh, I think I do," she said. "You're a man with a broken wheelchair and no evidence." Then she closed the door. For 2 days, I did nothing but pace and wait. I didn't tell Emily about the fine. She'd already been through enough. We were using an old loaner wheelchair from her school, but it was too small and squeaky. Every time it made that awful sound, I felt my stomach twist. Then Thursday night, my phone buzzed again. A text from Jake. "Flight lands Friday morning. Don't tell anyone I'm coming." Friday couldn't come fast enough. When I picked him up at the airport, he looked different. Leaner, harder, the kind of look that comes from seeing too much and saying too little. But when he saw me, he smiled, that same crooked grin from when he was a kid. "How am?" he asked as we loaded his duffel into the truck. "She's strong," I said, "stronger than me." When we pulled into the driveway, Emily was waiting at the window. The moment Jake stepped out, she wheeled herself down the ramp, squealing his name. He dropped his bag and hugged her tight. "There's my girl," he said softly. "You keeping these neighbors in line." She laughed, trying to. But when she looked down at the tiny loaner chair, her smile faded. Jake saw it too. He crouched beside her, running his hand along the bent rim. "This the one they gave you?" She nodded. "It's temporary, my real one's gone." He didn't say a word, just stood up, jaw tight. That night after Emily went to bed, Jake walked into the garage. He looked around at the pile of twisted metal from her old chair, still sitting in the corner. He knelt down and touched one of the cracked wheels. Then he turned to me and said, calm and steady, "Dad, we're not going to get angry, we're going to get evens." I frowned. "Jake, I'm not looking for troubles." He smiled faintly. "We're not starting trouble, we're using their own rules." He spent the next 3 hours sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop, reading through the HOA charter line by line. It was a monster, 183 pages of nonsense, but to Jake, it might as well have been a battle plan. Every so often, he'd mumble to himself, Section 4, HOA compliance violation, Section 8, failure to accommodate. When I asked what he was doing, he said, building a case. The next morning, he was up before sunrise, coffee in one hand, stack of papers in the other. "I'm heading to City Hall," he said. "For what?" "Filing complaints, HOA harassment, vandalism, the works." I watched him drive off, that same calm focus in his eyes that I'd seen in his photos from deployment. By noon, word had already started to spread. Karen was on her porch, packing on her phone, talking fast. I couldn't hear her, but I didn't need to. The way she looked at my house said everything. An hour later, I got an email from the city inspector's office confirming they'd received a formal accessibility complaint against the neighborhood HOA. When Jake got home, he was grinning. "Step 1 complete," he said. "Step 2, let's see how your queen of the cul-de-sac handles a federal investigation." And for the first time in weeks, I felt hope. But I didn't realize yet, Jake wasn't just going after Karen. He was about to take down the entire HOA. And this time, they wouldn't even see it coming. By Monday morning, the entire neighborhood was whispering. Word traveled faster than a yard sale rumor, something about an HOA complaint, an investigation, and the HOA president losing her cool. Karen hated two things more than anything: losing control and being talked about. Now she had both. I was out watering the lawn when she marched over, her sunglasses flashing in the sun like warning lights. "Good morning," I said, pretending not to notice the storm brewing behind those lenses. "Don't good morning me," she snapped. "I just got a call from the city. Someone filed an HOA complaint against my association." I shrugged. Well, maybe they should have thought about that before running over a disabled girl's wheelchair. She lowered her voice. "You think you can intimidate me because your son's in uniform? That's not how this works." I met her stare. "Then maybe you should learn how it does." She scoffed, spun on her heel, and stomped away, but I saw it, the flicker of fear in her eyes. For the first time, she realized this wasn't another HOA power trip. Jake didn't stop there. That night, I walked into the kitchen to find him printing flyers, official-looking pages with bold black letters that read, "Know your rights, HOA accessibility and ADA law." He posted them on every neighborhood bulletin board, every lamppost, even at the clubhouse entrance. Each one had a phone number for a veterans legal aid office, one that offered free assistance for cases just like ours. By Tuesday afternoon, 3 other families had already called that number. Turns out, Karen had fined a veteran down the street for having a wheelchair ramp not matching community color guidelines. Another family was cited for keeping a service dog. Jake wasn't just exposing Karen, he was lighting up every buried secret she thought she could hide. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday night. Usually maybe 5 people showed up, mostly retirees and the board members who nodded at everything Karen said, but this time it was standing room only. Jake told me not to go at first. "She'll expect you to get angry," he said. "Let me handle this." So I stayed home with Emily, but I'll admit I was packing the living room like a caged animal. Around 9 p.m., Jake came back. He looked calm, but I could see the adrenaline in his eyes. "Well," I asked. He grinned. She tried to bluff her way through it, said the ADA complaint was a misunderstanding. And she also said there no evidence of wrongdoing. I frowned. "That's not true." Jake smiled. "Exactly, so I gave them some." He pulled out a small USB drive and placed it on the table. "Security footage," he said. "I found the backup drive in the clubhouse. Guess what it shows?" I stared at him, stunned. "You're kidding." Nope, Karen thought deleting files from the camera was enough, but the system uploads backups automatically. He told me how he'd found it. The HOA charter gave any resident the right to access community records if they were part of a complaint. So he filed one and walked right into the office with a copy of the rulebook in hand. "And the footage?" I asked. He smiled, Brady behind the wheel, laughing. I didn't know whether to cheer or cry. "She didn't see it coming," Jake said. When I played the clip at the meeting, the room went silent. Karen tried to grab the projector cord. Someone told her to sit down. He leaned back in his chair, looking satisfied. Half the neighborhood turned on her right then. The board called an emergency review. They'll vote next week on whether to remove her as president. For a second, I couldn't even speak. I just looked at my son, the calm, methodical Marine who'd come home and done more damage with paperwork than I ever could have done with shouting. But the next morning, I realized the fight wasn't over. Karen wasn't the kind of person who lost quietly. Around 10 a.m., I found another envelope taped to my mailbox. This one wasn't from the HOA office. It was hand-delivered, scrawled in messy ink. It said, "Drop your complaint or things will get worse." No signature, no address, just that one sentence. I walked straight into the house and handed it to Jake. He read it, expression unreadable. Then he smiled, cold, slow, dangerous. "Good," he said, "now she's scared." He grabbed his phone and made a call. "Yeah," he said into the receiver, "I'd like to report harassment tied to an ADA investigation." I watched him hang up and pour himself a cup of coffee like nothing happened. "What now?" I asked. "Now," Jake said, "we wait and let her dig her own grave." That night I saw Karen's lights still on past midnight, shadows packing across her blinds. Whatever she was planning next, I could feel it. This war was about to get ugly. And the funny thing about wars, my son had already fought tougher ones. I should have known Karen wouldn't back down quietly. People like her don't surrender, they double down. The morning after Jake filed that harassment report, a tow truck showed up in front of our driveway. A man in an orange vest stepped out with a clipboard. "Sir, I'm here to tow a vehicle reported for parking violations," he said. I blinked. "What vehicle?" He pointed at my old pickup, the same one that hadn't moved in days. "That one," he said, "HOA order." I laughed. "It's in my driveway." He shrugged. "Not my problem, sir, I just follow the paperwork." Before I could say another word, Karen strutted out of her house, phone in hand, recording everything. "See," she said loudly, "even the HOA president gets held accountable. We all have to follow the rules." Jake stepped out onto the porch, arms crossed. He didn't say a word, just stared at her, cold and steady. The tow driver looked uncomfortable. Sir, if this is your vehicle, you can appeal the order. I'll hold off for now." Karen frowned. "He can't appeal it. He's been violating." Jake cut her off. "Actually, ma'am," he said, voice calm, "Section 6B of the HOA Charter allows any homeowner to request a suspension of enforcement pending an investigation, which is exactly what's happening right now." She froze. He'd quoted her own rulebook word for word. Jake stepped down from the porch and smiled at the tow driver. "Thank you for your time. We'll take it from here." The driver nodded quickly, climbed into his truck, and drove off. Karen stood there for a second, red-faced. "You can't keep hiding behind your son's uniform." Jake tilted his head. "You're right, I don't have to. I'm hiding behind your bylaws." Then he turned his back and walked inside. I could almost hear her teeth grinding. That night, the HOA email list lit up. Karen sent a long message accusing us of spreading misinformation and harassing the board. Jake replied with a single sentence. "Please refer to Ada Title II, Section 12,132, Discrimination by Public Entities," and attached a link to the federal code. By morning, half the neighborhood had seen it. But Karen wasn't done. 2 days later, she called the police. No warning, no notice, just flashing lights outside my window. 2 officers knocked on the door. "Sir, we received a complaint about a disturbance and possible vandalism," one said. I looked confused. "From who?" He pointed across the street. Karen was standing there, arms crossed, pretending to look scared. "She said someone been damaging her property," he added. Jake invited them in, completely unfazed. "You're welcome to check," he said. "We've got nothing to hide." They walked through, found nothing, and apologized before leaving. When the patrol car drove off, Jake turned to me. "She's getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes." And he was right. The next day, Karen tried another stunt. She held an emergency HOA board meeting without notifying the members. That's a violation. Jake knew it, and so did the city, because he'd already given them copies of her previous memos. By Friday, she got a letter, this time addressed to her personally. It came from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It was an official notice, a preliminary investigation into HOA discrimination practices. She lost it. I watched from the porch as she stood on her lawn, waving papers, shouting into her phone. Brady's truck sat in the driveway, silent now. I hadn't seen him drive it in days. That night, I heard something in our yard, footsteps, quick and heavy. Jake was already moving before I was fully awake. He opened the door, flashlight in one hand, phone camera in the other. We found a pile of rotten eggs splattered on the ramp. My stomach dropped. Emily's ramp. And right beside it, a footprint in the mud. Jake crouched down, took a photo, and smiled faintly. "Size 12, he said, "same as Brady's boots." The next morning, Jake filed another report, this time to the police. Harassment, vandalism, trespassing. Karen tried to spin it, saying it was kids playing pranks. But the officer who came by looked unimpressed. "Ma'am, those prints look deliberate," he said. "We'll be in touch." That afternoon, Brady's truck was gone again. The neighborhood was watching now. People waved at us differently, respectful, even supportive. One man down the street stopped me and said, "Didn't know what you folks were dealing with. Good on your son for standing up." For the first time in months, I felt the weight starting to lift. But Jake wasn't celebrating yet. He said, "Karen's cornered. When people like her lose control, they lash out one last time. We'll be ready." And that night, as the wind rustled the flags and porch lights flickered across the cul-de-sac, I had this strange feeling that the storm wasn't over. It was only gathering strength. When the official letter from HUD hit Karen's mailbox, everything changed. The woman who once strutted around the cul-de-sac like she owned the place suddenly started hiding behind curtains. Her morning inspection walk stopped overnight. No more clipboard, no more smug smiles, just silence. But that silence didn't mean peace, it felt like the calm before a storm. 3 days after that, the HOA held a mandatory meeting. Karen called it a clarification session. Jake called it damage control. The clubhouse was packed. You could feel the tension as soon as you walked in, people whispering, eyes darting between us and Karen. She stood at the front, hair perfectly sprayed into place, fake smile plastered on. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice a little too chipper. "I understand there have been confusion regarding recent events." Jake and I sat near the back. Emily was at home with my wife, still recovering from everything Brady had done. My son's arms were folded, calm but alert. Karen went on, twisting every fact she could. "There's been an unfortunate misunderstanding with one of our families, but I assure you, the HOA remains committed to fairness and order." Then she looked straight at me. "We've all seen how emotions can lead to exaggerations. Let's not spread false accusations." The room murmured. A man in a baseball cap raised his hand. "Ma'am," he said, "are you saying the federal investigation is fake?" Karen hesitated. "It's preliminary, these things happen." "Then why'd they call my wife for a statement?" he pressed. The room erupted, people talking over each other, questions flying. Jake leaned into me. "Let her dig," he whispered. Karen slammed her hand on the podium. "Everyone please, this is about neighborhood unity." But the unity she was clinging to was gone. The neighbors weren't buying it anymore. When the meeting ended, Jake stood up. "One question, ma'am," he said, his tone polite. "If you're so confident in your leadership, you won't mind if we review the HOA's financial records, right? Transparency builds trust." Karen's face froze. "That's not standard procedure." Jake smiled faintly. "Actually, by state law, members are entitled to see them upon written request. Consider this one." And he handed her a printed letter, signed, dated, and notarized. The whole room went quiet. You could practically hear the sound of her composure cracking. That night, she sent out another email blast, claiming Jake was harassing the board. But by now, nobody was falling for it. A few even replied, asking when they could see the books too. By the weekend, Jake had gotten copies of the HOA's financials. He didn't even need to look long. Half the numbers didn't add up. Payments listed to vendors that didn't exist. Maintenance costs doubled from 1 month to the next. Jake grinned when he saw it. "Looks like someone's been padding the budget." He didn't go public right away. He waited, collected copies, cross-checked dates. He was patient, marine patient. Then one evening, a black sedan parked in front of Karen's house. A man in a suit stepped out, clipboard in hand. I watched from my porch as he knocked. Karen answered, smiled nervously, then disappeared inside with him. Jake didn't say much, but I could see the satisfaction in his eyes. "That's the city's fraud investigator," he said quietly. "HUD must have forwarded the report." 2 days later, Karen's husband, the guy I'd only seen mowing the lawn in silence, was out front loading boxes into his car. He looked defeated. The neighborhood was buzzing again, people whispering on sidewalks, group chats lighting up with theories. Then came the kicker. A letter from the HOA's vice president, not Karen, went out to all homeowners. It said, "Effective immediately, Karen H. has been placed on administrative leave pending review of her conduct." Administrative leave for the HOA president. Jake folded the letter and set it on the counter. "Not done yet," he said. The next morning, we found Brady's truck back in their driveway. He was packing outside, smoking. His mother's voice could be heard through the open window, shrill, angry. Jake walked down the driveway, calm as ever. "Evening," he said. Brady turned. "You think you won, huh? You got my mom in troubles." Jake didn't even flinch. "Your mom did that herself." Brady stepped closer. "You ruined her life." Jake's eyes didn't move. "You ruined my sister's wheelchair." They stood there silent for a long moment. The air was thick, then Brady looked away first. Jake turned back toward me. "It's not over yet," he said, "but it's close." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything, the ramp, the eggs, the way Emily cried the first time she saw her broken wheelchair. But I also thought about the look on Jake's face, calm, calculated. He wasn't angry anymore, he was waiting. And whatever he was waiting for, I had a feeling Karen wasn't going to like it. The Monday after Karen's administrative leave, the neighborhood felt different. Quieter, like someone had turned down the volume on all the noise she'd created. For months, every morning started the same, Karen's SUV circling the street, clipboard flashing in the sunlight. But that morning, her driveway was empty. No SUV, no power walk, no HOA queens. I should have felt relieved, but Jake said something that stuck with me. Never relax until you know who's holding the strings. And sure enough, later that afternoon, an email arrived. It wasn't from Karen, it was from a new acting president, a guy named Tom Weathers. The message said, due to unfortunate confusion caused by recent events, the HOA will be temporarily reinstating several enforcement measures. Jake chuckled when he read it. Unfortunate confusion, he said, shaking his head. Translation, Karen's pulling his strings from behind the curtain. I asked, you think she's still running things? He smirked, oh, she's running them right off a cliff. Jake started digging again. He reached out to a few neighbors, the ones who'd quietly supported us. Turns out Tom was one of Karen's loyalists, a guy who owed her favors. But what he didn't know was that Jake already had a copy of every HOA email Karen ever sent, including a few that contradicted the bylaws she'd signed. He was building a case, slow, steady, and ironclad. That evening, Jake asked me to help him set up some cameras, small motion sensors along the ramp, porch, and driveway. He said, if they try anything again, we'll have proof before sunrise. I didn't ask how he got the equipment, but knowing Jake's military background, I didn't have to. 2 nights later, it paid off. At around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed, motion alert backyard. Jake was already up, he moved like a shadow, silent but focused. We looked at the live feed, 2 figures sneaking around the side fence, one tall, one shorter, both wearing hoodies. Jake whispered, that's Brady's walk. We didn't confront them right away. We just watched as they tried to tip over Emily's flower pots, then spray something across the fence. The next morning, Jake downloaded the footage and drove to the police station. No theatrics, no anger, just calm, clear reporting. By noon, an officer showed up at Karen's door. She came out looking disheveled, arguing with him, pointing toward our house. But this time, no one believed her. The officer watched the footage on Jake's phone and frowned. That's clear as day, he said, we'll handle it. By evening, Brady's truck was gone, impounded apparently. Karen didn't come outside that day or the next. But Jake wasn't done. He began gathering every neighbor who'd been fined unfairly, every person she'd harassed over paint colors or mailboxes. They met in our garage one night, coffee cups on folding chairs, telling stories. Jake took notes. If you've got emails, letters, anything, send them to me, he said. Within days, he had a dossier thick enough to fill a binder. Then he filed it not just with the HOA board, but with the city's community affairs office and the local news tip line. That's when everything blew open. The following week, a reporter showed up in the neighborhood. I watched from the window as she spoke with residents. Cameras rolling, microphones out. The story was spreading, HOA under investigation for harassment and misuse of funds. Karen's name wasn't mentioned, not yet, but everyone knew. Jake didn't take any credit. He just stayed in the background, cleaning the porch, fixing the ramp, smiling quietly every time he saw another car slow down to stare at Karen's darkened house. Then came the letter that sealed it. The HOA's insurance company withdrew coverage pending fraud findings, which meant, legally, Karen and her officers could be personally liable for any damages. When Jake told me that, I nearly dropped my coffee. You mean she could lose her house? He nodded. Every dime she took, every fine she handed out, if it was unlawful, she'll pay it back. For the first time since all this started, I saw Karen drive by. Her face was pale, eyes sunken, her once perfect hair tied in a loose bun. She didn't look like the queen of the HOA anymore. She looked like someone who just realized the kingdom was made of sand. Jake watched her car pass. Funny, he said. When I was overseas, they told us sometimes the best way to win a fight is to let the enemy destroy themselves. That night, I heard laughter from Emily's room, the first real laughter in weeks. She was watching a movie with my wife, her new wheelchair beside her bed, bright blue and sturdy. And for the first time in months, I felt peace. But Jake, he wasn't smiling for long. He said, Dad, tomorrow's the HOA hearing, Karen's trying to show up again. I raised an eyebrow even after all this. He nodded, yeah, but this time I'll be waiting for her. The day of the HOA hearing felt like Judgment Day. It was held in the same little clubhouse where Karen used to rule her empire. the same room where she once told me my porch ramp violated aesthetics. But this time, the tables were literally turned. She sat on one side, her hair pinned back too tight, papers clutched in her hand like a shield. Across from her sat Jake, calm, composed, sleeves rolled up, a quiet storm behind his eyes. I stood near the back, surrounded by neighbors who'd shown up just to watch. You could feel the shift in the air. Nobody was afraid of her anymore. They were curious to see the woman who'd built her throne finally face the man who'd pulled the rug out from under it. The interim HOA president, Tom, cleared his throat. We're here to address ongoing allegations regarding misuse of HOA funds, harassment, and noncompliance with community bylaws. Karen immediately interrupted. Allegations are not facts, she snapped. This is nothing more than a witch hunt orchestrated by that family. All eyes turned toward us. Jake didn't flinch. Ma'am, he said evenly, if by that family you mean the one whose daughter's wheelchair your son destroyed, then yes, that family. A murmur rippled through the rooms. Karen straightened. My son made a mistake. Jake cut her off. Your son vandalized medical equipment. That's not a mistake, that's a crime. Her jaw tightened. You have no proof. Jake opened a folder. Actually, we do. He handed copies to the board members, clear color photos from the night Brady came back to our property, the same night they thought they'd get away with it. Karen's face drained of color. Tom squinted at the papers. Is this recent? Jake nodded. 2 weeks ago, caught on camera, filed with the sheriff's department, case numbers right there. Someone in the back gasped. Another neighbor whispered, that's her kid, all right. Karen slammed her hand on the table. You set us up. Jake leaned forward slightly. No, ma'am, you set yourself up. I just pressed record. Her breathing got heavier. Her voice trembled as she pointed at Jake. You think you're some kind of hero because you wore a uniform? You're just a bully with a badge. Jake didn't move. He looked her straight in the eyes and said, I'm a Marine, and unlike you, I don't hide behind rules to hurt people. The room went dead silent. Even Tom looked down. Jake turned toward the board. If I may continue, he said politely. I also obtained copies of the HOA's bank statements from the past 6 months. Some of you might want to look closely at the payments made to Suncrest Landscaping. He clicked a remote and the screen behind him lit up with a spreadsheet. Numbers, dates, company names, all neatly lined up. Turns out, Jake continued, Suncrest Landscaping doesn't exist. It's a shell company registered under Karen Henderson's name. The room erupted. People shouted, what? You've got to be kidding. That's fraud. Karen stood up shaking. You can't prove that's mine. Jake clicked again. A screenshot appeared, the business license with her signature on it. Gasps filled the room. Tom rubbed his temples. Karen, tell me this isn't true. She stammered, it's just a misunderstanding. My husband handled the... Funny, Jake said quietly, because your husband already gave a statement, said he didn't even know about it. Karen turned red, then pale, then red again. At that moment, the door opened. 2 uniformed officers stepped in. One of them nodded at Jake. We received a call regarding the vandalism case. We're here to speak with Ms. Henderson and her son. Karen's voice cracked. You called them. Jake shook his head. No, they called me. The officers approached her calmly. Ma'am, we just need you to come with us to answer a few questions. The crowd parted like water. Karen looked around, wild-eyed, realizing everyone she once controlled was now watching her fall apart. She turned to Jake, voice breaking, you ruined me. Jake stood, collected his papers, and said softly, no, ma'am, you did that the moment you hurt my family. The officers guided her out. Her heels echoed down the hallway, click, 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 until the door shut behind her. Silence filled the room, then someone started clapping, slowly at first, then more joined in. Tom cleared his throat again, but his voice shook. Effective immediately, he said, Karen Henderson is removed from the HOA board pending investigation. Her membership is suspended indefinitely. Jake nodded once, packed up his files, and walked toward me. I whispered, it's over. He gave a small smile, almost. As we stepped outside, the sun was setting, that kind of quiet orange glow that feels like closure. But I could tell from the way Jake glanced back toward her house, there was one last thing he planned to do. Something that would make sure Karen, and everyone like her, never forgot what happens when you mess with the wrong family. The morning after Karen was escorted out, our street felt lighter. It wasn't just the sunshine, it was like a weight had been lifted from the whole neighborhood. The tension that had built over months evaporated almost overnight. Emily rolled down the driveway in her new wheelchair, her hair bouncing in the wind. She paused halfway and looked up at me, eyes wide. "Dad, did we really do it?" I knelt beside her. "We did. Your chair's safe, and more importantly, you're safe." She smiled, that genuine grin that had been missing since the day Brady ran over her old wheelchair. And for the first time, I saw the sparkle in her eyes return. But Jake, he was already surveying the street. Calm, alert, like the Marine who had been preparing for this day long before it arrived. "Almost," he said. I frowned. "Almost what?" "Karen's gone for now," he said, "but the HOA's rules, they can still hurt people if left unchecked. We need to make sure this never happens again." He spent the morning meeting with neighbors, walking through bylaws, clarifying rights, showing them exactly what Karen had done and, more importantly, how to prevent it in the future. By noon, a group of homeowners had drafted a new HOA code of conduct, strict, enforceable, and fair. No favoritism, no bullying, and absolutely no personal vendettas disguised as rules. Meanwhile, word of Karen's ousting spread like wildfire. I heard from neighbors down the street, neighbors across the cul-de-sac, even a few from other blocks. Everyone wanted to talk about the woman who had ruled like a queen and the Marine who had quietly dismantled her empire. By mid-afternoon, Jake sat on the porch, drinking coffee, watching Emily practice a new trick in her wheelchair. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah, feels good seeing her laugh again." Just then a delivery truck pulled up. It wasn't for us, it was for Karen. A large crate, labeled clearly with the HOA's new leadership board address. Curious, we watched as it was delivered to the temporary office. Inside were dozens of items, office supplies, books, files, everything Karen had claimed as personal property but actually belonged to the HOA. I couldn't help but chuckle. Karma, it seemed, had its own shipping department. That evening, neighbors gathered for an informal block party. Emily laughed with other kids, rolling up and down the street with her new wheelchair, completely free and unbothered. One neighbor clapped me on the shoulder. "Your son, man, he's something else." I shook my head, smiling. "He's more than something else, he's family." Jake didn't seek attention. He stayed at the edge of the party, quiet, watching over Emily, ready for anything, but he didn't have to worry. The street was finally ours again. Then came the final piece, the HOA board's official announcement. Karen was not only removed from the board but personally liable for restitution. Every unjust fine, every misappropriated dollar, every harassment complaint, she would have to settle or face legal consequences. By that night, the entire neighborhood seemed to breathe at once. Windows opened, lawn chairs came out, people smiled. Even Tom, the temporary HOA president, gave Jake a nod of respect. Emily rolled up to us holding a handmade card. "For Jake," she said. It read, "Thank you for saving my wheels," and my smile, "Love, Em." Jake knelt, eyes soft for the first time in weeks, and took her hand. "You did the hard part, kiddo, you never gave up." The sun set across the cul-de-sac, painting the houses gold. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and faint barbecue smoke from neighbors celebrating. I looked at my son, my daughter, our street, and realized something important. Power can corrupt, but courage, calm, steady courage, can restore it. Karen, she would fade into local gossip, a cautionary tale about what happens when control and cruelty collide. Brady, he wouldn't be around to cause more trouble, at least not on this street. As for us, we had our lives back, our home, our family, and most importantly, our dignity. Jake finally leaned back in his chair, stretching. "Think we're done?" he asked. I smiled. "Yeah, I think we're done." Emily rolled past us one last time, spinning in her new wheels, laughing so hard she nearly tipped over. Jake caught her, steadying her with a grin. And that's when I knew we hadn't just fought for a wheelchair or for revenge. We fought for the right to live without fear and won. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it rolls quietly, patiently, like a Marine coming home to protect his family. And in our little corner of the world, that was enough. Every HOA has a story on HOA Headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.